Number two, we looked at what is a Greek, and then we also looked at what is a Grecian. Now, the word Grecian doesn't appear in Romans, but it does appear in Acts. Grecians are there, and so we thought, well, we better take a look at the word Greek and Grecian. And then we thought, well, the word barbarian also appears, so we're gonna deal with that. We deal with that with number two last week, and so the question was, what is a Greek, and what is a Grecian, and what is a barbarian? And this is what we found. So a Greek is an uncircumcised Hebrew, previously cut off from his brethren. So the uncircumcised Hebrew was a Hebrew Greek. That is, he was a Hebrew living in Greek culture. Why was he living in Greek culture? Because he had been cut off from his brethren of Israel. So his culture now was he picked up the Greek culture. Titus, Timothy, Trophimus, golly. You think by now I'd not be able to say this, that Trophimus were examples of Hebrew Greeks. They were Hebrews, but yet they were uncircumcised. In culture, that would be language, including culture, they were Greeks.
And the Grecian. Oh, yeah.
Okay, then there's the word Grecian. Grecian is in use in the New Testament in the text. A Grecian is different from a Greek, and we have learned that in the New Testament a Grecian is a Hellenized Jew. So that would be one that is a Hebrew that is religious. He's circumcised, but of Greek culture and language. So a Hellenized Jew, that means that's different from the Greek. The Hebrew Greeks were uncircumcised. The Grecian was they were Jewish, they were religious. So now if you go back and you read the account in Acts chapters
9.
Well, no, before that. So when the Grecians
Acts 6:1. 6:1 or 5:1.
Yeah. So when you read about Grecians in the early chapters of Acts, these were Hellenized. That's why they were able to sit with each other. They were Jews. What separated them was their language and their culture.
It was Acts chapter 6.
Yeah, Acts chapter 6.
Chapter 9.
Yeah.
And then Acts chapter 11.
Okay, then we have the word barbarian. So barbarian, as it appears in the New Testament, is one that is non-Hellenic. That is one that is not of Greek culture. So the barbarian was uncircumcised. They were pagans or heathens. They worshipped other gods. They were foreign in language and culture. They were that foreign being foreign to the Greek culture, foreign to the Greek language. So it would be very difficult for a Greek, a Hebrew Greek, to speak with a barbarian unless they had the gift of tongues. All right. I have a comment here that Paul speaks about being debtor. He says he's a debtor to the Greek and to the barbarian, but he doesn't say that he was a debtor to the Grecian. Now, why would he not be a debtor to the Grecian? Any volunteers? Because the Grecian was already one that believed the gospel of God. So Paul's work was to the uncircumcised. So that would be to the uncircumcised Hebrew and the uncircumcised barbarian. He's a debtor to the Greek and the barbarian, but the Grecians were already buckled in with the rest of the religious Jews. They were just separated by language and culture. Okay. With that in place, then, let's move on. Any comments? Anything that anybody wants to just verbalize before we move?
I got a question. Oh, I got a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Uh, so the Greeks that he's referring to, is there an assumption that all of them are equally knowledgeable about the scriptures, or is there great variance across the people that he'd be speaking to as Greeks?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've come to understand that Paul was quite selective as to which of the Hebrew Greeks he called into service. And he called those that specifically, like Timothy, had been taught the scriptures. And those scriptures would have been the prophetic scriptures. So, and a Hebrew family that was diligent, even though they were of Greek culture and not circumcised, they would still share the scriptures, some of them, not all of them. So we understand, presumably then, that Paul was really interested in those that knew the scriptures because he presumes that in his writings.
Also, God had foreordained them.
Yes.
And he was gifting them.
Yeah.
And they were gifted according to God's purpose for them.
Yeah.
Some were made this, some were made that, some had this gift, others had another gift.
Yeah. I think that so yes, there were differences, and not all of them could do the same thing.
According to the measure of faith.
Yes, that is, and that faith being believing.